Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Cabral Concept. Great to have you here today. Our special guest this week is Aaron Alexander, author of The Align Method. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for making time to do this, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. You wrote a really amazing book, which we're going to get to in just a moment. But before reading the book, I like the philosophy. So I love being able to understand, like, how did you arrive at the philosophy of kind of rethinking from literally the ground up, how we should be moving our bodies to what I always talk about as have less stagnation, to not just feel like we're kind of locked in place, to be more mobile, to be able to be more free, to have more energy. So where did you start this process? I mean, were you always into fitness, into health? What did that look like?
I think my initial foray into fitness was obsessing over bodybuilding, which probably a lot of young men have experienced at some point. The story that I have around that is kind of just feeling insecure and uncomfortable, maybe safe in my body, in my environment, just not really feeling like a part. Walking into a room and not really feeling like, oh yeah, like this is my place. These are my people, so feeling kind of separate. And so compensating via getting physically as large as I could, as fast as I could, and going about that in pretty imbalanced fashions, and that leading to various different muscular imbalances and injuries and, chronic pain and things of the sort. And so I was forced, like so many people have a similar story, to start to look for more holistic approaches at being in this physical experience. Mm-hmm. So I ended up moving to Hawaii and went to school for psychology, and then was doing personal training and went to massage school, and then went to Rolfing school, and, got into various different modalities of manual therapy or hands-on therapy. And it's just been a slow process of putting the parts back together. But I think the initial root was just feeling generally, not at home in my body, and trying to compensate any way that I could. And now it's been a long, gradual journey of feeling a little bit more comfortable inside here.
That's good to hear. And I mean, I suffered from a lot of the same when I was not internally well, when I was suffering from all sorts of different diseases of the body. The one thing I could turn to actually was the gym, and I could just do slow, methodical bodybuilding based workouts and build my body up. So physically I look like I might be healthy, but internally, not so much. And eventually that did catch up with me, like it does a lot of people. I mean, I was physically looking healthy, but I was getting pneumonia like 5 out of 6 winters. And I was, I could literally not stretch my arms above my head. And so there was a lot, I was huffing and puffing going up a flight of stairs. There was a lot of issues again, so that's why I do warn people is like, just be careful to people that you see online and you kind of say like, oh, I want that body. We just want to be careful that there's a whole package that comes along with it, and you want the health, not just necessarily the physique. It's interesting too that you did massage and Rolfing along with the personal training, because that teaches you so much more about movement patterns and the mobility of the body. And so, did you take a lot with that too today?
Yeah, for sure. And then in relation to the muscles, I think it's interesting. We're taught through looking at the cover of Muscle and Fitness and, seeing The Rock with like chains around his neck and whatnot, that like, that's the optimal man, that's optimal fitness, but that could also be a person that's their nervous system is wrapped up in a survival state, and when you feel that fight, flight, sympathetic response, you'll have blood shunted to the periphery into those muscles in your arms and your legs to fight and flight and get the hell out of the room. And, within that, you're missing out on that replenishment and the restoration of having the resources to heal your gut and heal your viscera and, like the root, the engine of you. And so it's a really interesting kind of story that we've been told that, the bigger you are, the healthier you are. But oftentimes, what lies on the face isn't the whole story of what lies below. So I think coming back into a place of stillness, practicing just like being with yourself, it's like, why are you working out in the first place? Why are you maybe taking an orthorexic approach to nutrition? Like getting into the root of cultivating joie de vivre in your life. Like, how do you feel about your relationships? How do you feel about your career? Do you feel safe in the world? Like, do you feel a part of something bigger than yourself? These are all, I think, foundations to a healthy organism, but because they're not as easily measured and managed, and published in a journal, it's something that gets brushed over in Western culture. But if you go into other cultures, like you've had experience with, oftentimes it's like, oh, that's the forefront. So within the Rolfing stuff, working with fascia and connective tissue is something that I'm endlessly enamored by. And Rolfing is kind of one of, has been kind of on the forefront of leading that conversation around fascia and connective tissue. Now it's very popular. You go to any yoga class or see a personal trainer or whatever, they'll talk about fascia. But getting into the body fitting inside of itself is kind of an analogy that I use. And that's essentially what we're doing when we're working with clients. Is sometimes when people are walking down the street, you can see it kind of seems like they're kind of uncomfortable. And it's just like it's like their skin doesn't fit right. They're like a Lego set and some of the pieces are kind of on in a wonky way. And
a lot of compensation patterns going on.
Yeah. And what you'll see within that is those compensatory patterns, they inevitably will manifest themselves up around, the ribs and the intercostal muscles and the diaphragm and the neck. And, that's, you can't change any part of the body without altering the whole system. And so as the body starts to feel more comfortable inside of itself, it starts to fit. All of a sudden you'll start to see the body be able to go into down regulation and rest and digest and being able to have that big full abdominal and thoracic and, a breath should be your whole torso. It shouldn't just be like a belly breath. That's really misleading. So when you can get that full whole vital capacity of your breath and you get a full exhalation and a full inhalation, it sends a signal through the rest of your physiology that you're safe. It's okay to restore and rest. So that's been kind of in my journey, is getting into that point of sorting out what are the methods to fit inside of this body. And that's, I'm still figuring it out. And I feel like you have a lot of information to provide with it as well.
No, I think, and we're all on the path. But you brought up so many great points, and I have a question back to you that, I can't speak for obviously all men, but a lot of people in my practice, a lot of guys that just connect with me online, they're into bodybuilding and they're in their 20s, and I almost feel like for a lot of guys, it's a rite of passage where it's like you haven't not always like. They feel like they haven't proven themselves in other aspects of life. So I don't want to speak for anybody else. Let me just talk for myself. So in my early 20s, I was still sick. I wasn't feeling well. I hadn't accomplished a lot. I don't say career-wise. Like I enjoy what I did. I was helping people. But from my own, I didn't feel I was enough. And I think now looking back on it, I was compensating. I'm 5'8", and I weighed almost 200 pounds as a natural bodybuilder. I mean, I was enormous for my height. And now I'm a very comfortable 165, 167. And it's the right weight for me. I don't have to fight to be at this weight. I can do normal workouts. I can do fun workouts. And it's just what my body will maintain. But I didn't feel comfortable with that until maybe my early 30s, because I felt like I was maybe trying to, again, compensate for not being healthy or whatever it might be. But I don't know if it would be any other way until kind of a lot of people reach their maybe later 20s, early 30s. What's been your experience?
Well, I think it comes to mind is I think we continually have this conversation or relationship with ourselves, and a lot of the messages that we might have been programmed, wherever it came from, whether it came from maybe ancestry or from our mother or father or from media or all of it, or maybe it was, it's just you somehow. It doesn't matter. There's this ongoing conversation happening inside of our heads. And I think gaining some semblance of awareness that that conversation is happening. You're not crazy. Everybody's got the conversation happening. So if you can start to come into coherence and relationship and acceptance of like, oh, there's that limiting belief system. I did a podcast conversation with Daniel Amen yesterday from the Amen Clinic, and in his recent book, he calls them like the little dragons, those little neuroses that we have kind of chattering through our heads. And I think having the spaciousness in our lives and in our minds to be able to pause and observe and say, are the things that I'm telling myself, are they kind? Are they to the betterment of my future self? Or am I, continually essentially attacking myself? And you discussed this in relation to your history. Like, you grew up in a place, I'm sure you've talked about in your podcast by now, but you grew up in a way that it was almost like inappropriate to be healthy. And so developing that spaciousness of being able to bear witness to what the heck it is that we're saying to ourselves in the first place, I think that's majorly important. And then from there, starting to practice or rehearse more constructive ways to speak to ourselves, and that could literally be like looking in a mirror, and like, romance yourself, like tell yourself, why, how appreciative you are for all the things you've done for you and all the things you've done for other people. And, if you work so hard to give yourself good food and, you take yourself to the gym and, you did all your homework and you work so hard, so giving yourself that spaciousness to have a pat on the back every now and again, I think is immensely valuable. And we probably the broader we have been kind of indoctrinated into a culture of more, so that Alan Watts calls it the disease of more, and it's like, if your mind is set in this ongoing mode of dissatisfaction with the present, and you'll be happy when you get to a place that doesn't exist, that place does not exist. And you'll continually be setting yourself up for, all the things, more norepinephrine and cortisols. And like, again, all those are really valuable. But if you're chronically stuck in that survival state, that becomes very depletive. Now you exist in an inflamed body that's continually under chronic stress, waiting for some magical day that doesn't exist. Like, the day is now. Like, the moment is now. You have access to it now. It's just a matter, I think, of having the spaciousness to step aside from yourself for a moment, realize that you've been talking to yourself for a long time, acknowledging what's the shape and the constitution of that conversation. Is it constructive or is it destructive? And then putting in the reps to practice a more constructive conversation. And then from that spills into, your postural patterns and your cellular function and your general biological disposition.
I mean, those are great points, and some really, really great people as well to check out, like Alan Watts. I mean, his work is some of the cornerstones for a lot of the self-development people today. So one of the big things that I've always found is that it can be really challenging for people, because we are essentially programmed to believe and think in a certain way. And we have to somehow get to the point where we realize that whether we ever achieve more or not, that we're already enough. And to believe that is a big pill to swallow for many people. And then at the same time, they'll say, well, if I already believe that I'm enough, then I won't want to go for more. And that's anything but the truth. So could you explain, because I'm assuming that you believe similar, that everyone is already enough how they're presently constituted. However, you can still be more and have more and do more in life if you choose to.
Yeah, more comes to, and this is all stuff I'm in process with. Like, I'm dealing with this stuff like today. And I'm by no means some transcendent guru figure that's telling people what to do. But I think there's some level of physics to it. When you come from a place of craving, typically you end up pushing away whatever it is that you crave. You're sending the signal out to the world around you that, you are not that thing. You do not have that thing. And then the world's like, okay, well, I don't want to give it to you. Everything's paradoxical. The more you want a thing, the less likely you are to having it in some scenarios. I think there is obviously something to like visualization and, rehearsing yourself in that experience, which gets into like manifestation and things of the sort, which I don't have a strong, footing in an embodied way. Whether does it function that, you visualize a thing and then that visualization somehow works on some quantum level to bring it into your life? Like, maybe, I'm not really sure about that exactly. But I think that the practice of visualization is something that is incredibly important, and rehearsing the thing as though you already have it. It sets yourself up to actually be able to receive it when it comes, as opposed to being in this continual, if you think you don't deserve a thing, if it like deep down subconscious level, you think you don't deserve a thing, when the opportunities to present themselves come to receive the thing, one, you may sabotage yourself in quotations because you still consciously are like, yeah, totally. It's for me. But subconsciously like, no. It would be more unsafe for me to have that thing that I think that I desire, because I know for sure that in this present mindset, as destructive and catastrophic as it is, I'm still alive. Mm-hmm. I haven't tried on life from this other place that I say that I think I want. So I think, rehearsing and practicing inside of your mind as though, you're already there. Yes. And this is again, more secret manifestation. I'm sure many people might be like rolling their eyes, but I think what it does by really living in that space, it calms the nervous system in a way. And it doesn't put you in a contracted reaching. It puts you in just more a place of like, relaxation. And when you go into a room with someone that really feels like they have everything that they need, so practicing appreciation of what you have. Do you have food in your fridge? Do you have a car or ability to Uber around? Can you walk? Can you breathe? Like, you have so much stuff to be so grateful for. And instead we're kind of stuck on this pattern of wanting what we don't have. When you meet a person that really feels fed, they feel satiated, they don't have this clinging, reaching type mentality or sensation, you want to be around them. They become magnetic. So I think it's like a combination of things. And I don't think I'm answering a particular question. I apologize. But one, it's rehearsing and practicing as though you already are the thing that you desire. And then two, it's winding it back and having complete, utter gratitude for what you already have. And then within that, it's like another level of coming into more congruence in your mental, emotional, physical situation, is maybe looking, if you do have some type of symptoms or, pain or something of the sort, changing the relationship with that to, this is working for me. This is signaling something to me to create change in my life. You can have gratitude for that as well. So as opposed to having those sensations being something I want to chop it away or take it or push it away, that resistance, instead coming into a relationship of, acceptance and appreciation for all of the subtle signs that we get, even if they might feel kind of, untasteful or unfavorable. Coming into acceptance, I think, is a really important thing. I apologize. I realized that was very windy, meandering way of probably not saying very much, but hopefully there was some value in there.
100%. Yeah, no, we talk about this. So, one of the shows that I do each week is just on mindset. And that is because even though there is a metaphysical aspect to it, there's also a good amount of science behind it now in terms of physics and quantum physics. And I think the visualization that you're talking about is really important, because you need to somehow imagine a life different than what you presently live in. But then the problem is, if you're only imagining it and looking at it, then you're telling yourself, well, this isn't real. So it's somehow believing, just as you said, that it's already been done, that you're feeling what it would feel like if you had already achieved it. And that is actually where quantum physics then starts to come into, because then you begin to resonate at a different level. And yes, we are energy. So if we look at that, we're saying, okay, well, if the thing that we want is resonating here and we're resonating there, then maybe there is this actual attraction. And again, I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not, but I can tell you this, there seems like there's almost no downside to trying it. And a lot of people have had a lot of success, at least with this belief pattern. So that's good enough for me. I'll go with that.
And also thinking like self-parenting, I think is an important thing. And if you look at your kid and you're like, man, I'll love you when you're, score a hat trick in ice hockey or whatever your thing is, or you get straight A's, like, oh man, I'm going to love you when you do that. It might create a catalyst for them to compensate and do that. But they're going to be doing it from an initial state of fear, contraction, and resistance. And now you're imposing that seed of that, that sensation of feeling unenough, that conditional love. And so instead draw that back and come from a place of right now, exactly as you are, with your knee pain or your IBS or your headaches or your whatever the thing is, like, I accept you. I love you entirely. Like this, like I can find acceptance for all of this. And then from there, I think it can open up the spaciousness for growth from a place of where you actually have a really, a strong footing, and not just being appreciative and acceptance of like the seeming like bad things, also really like making a practice with as much regularity as you can. Maybe do it in the morning or before you go to bed, track through and like, what are all the amazing things that happened to you today? Like, what were the wins throughout the day? And if you actually start to get yourself in that pattern, you start to develop this positive, in quotations, momentum, which makes you more nice to be around. It makes you a more attractive person in general. And, the person that's the most important to attract is yourself to yourself. So if you don't want to be in your head, who the hell else would want to be in and around you? So I think there's what is the book? The Soul of Money is an interesting book. And one of the things they get into the Soul of Money book is you don't deserve more money if you don't have appreciation for what you have. Now, I think there's some kind of, there's more like physics to it, like metaphysics, I guess, I don't think the world, the universe, yourself really wants you to get more until you actually pass the test of appreciating where you're at. And I think that sometimes we can get mixed up with the law of attraction and manifestation, all that stuff, because we end up spending so much time where we're not, even though we're visualizing as though we're there. We never came back enough to actually have gratitude for the things that we do have. And then I think that builds the raw constituents, metabolically and physiologically and posturally, for us to feel like, yeah, you know what, I do have enough. And now it's like, oh, okay, I do have enough. Okay, I am enough. Oh, okay, whew, all right, cool. Now you're finally starting to rest. Now you can finally start to restore, and you can get strong enough to go up to the next level in your life.
I think there's a lot to that. 100%. No, without a doubt. And I would love to talk too, because I know this is a lot of your work is how does all this stress and tension and forcing things to happen in your life, which we know, I think a lot of my listeners understand that it's when you create this type of stress in your life, well, it's a central nervous system stressor, whether it's through really hard workouts or really hard, whatever it might be, and you're not able to then relax that, let it go. How does it get trapped in the body and then end up as, again, tight fascia, poor posture, et cetera?
Well, without like coming back to ground, something would be like, okay, like this seems a little bit woo-woo. What the heck are we actually talking about? Just how would you be afraid in your body? Like, how would you express fear in your body? How would you be startled in your body? How would you be defensive in your body? All of those have very clear, distinct postural expressions. And there's I don't know if you've heard of Albert Morabian. He came up with a concept called the 55-38-7 principle in the 60s, which this is contentious as well as his most kind of research stuff. But essentially what he came up with was that 55% of our communication comes from body language. 38 comes from the tonality of our voice, and then 7 is the actual words that we're speaking. And that's specific to if there's incongruence between the words that we're speaking and the tone and the body language. 93% of the time, which I think it's, it'd be even higher than that really, if you any level of sensitive. If there's incongruence there, you trust the body language, you trust the tone, you trust the pacing of their language. You can see the dilation of their pupils, or are they blushing? Those are the things you're really looking at. Like, we're animals, we're like, we've got the reptile brain and the mammalian brain. Like, that's like the root of what's driving this thing, I think, is those parts. And we're always tracking millions of bits of information of, not just the world around us, but ourselves as well. And so posturally speaking, all of those expressions, those mental emotional expressions, they have physiological postural correlates. And so if you're continually maybe staring into your cell phone or staring into your computer or hunched over in a desk since you were put, in kindergarten. Before that you were running and you were sitting on the floor and you were hanging off of tree branches and you were, putting turds in your mouth off of the grass and, you're like full animal, and then you kind of start to get housed in this position that if you were to see any primate, or most critters in general, and they were kind of stuck, hunched over, forward head posture, medial rotation of the shoulder girdles, and hyperkyphosis, and the knees dropped in medially in that valgus position, and the arches collapsed in. Like you'd be like, oh, that's a sick animal. Like it wouldn't take much to be able to look at that and say, oh, I think there's something wrong with it. And so internally, you could say that's. You could look at it from a lot of levels. I mean, you're literally like you're crimping the nervous system. Mm-hmm. You're crimping the lymphatic system. You're crimping the whole circulation of blood and lymph and energy, if you'd like to use language like that. You're putting a crimp in the hose. And when the spine of a person is not in a balanced, centrated, neutral position, say if you're lifting or just in general, it literally will downregulate your access to power, to strength, because it doesn't trust you from an imbalanced position. Mm-hmm. So throughout the day, when you go into those kind of like defeated, hunched over postural patterns that are all tied into the way that we think and we feel and respond to our environment, it has an effect on not just thoughts and feelings, but also literally the way we produce ourselves. And if you habituate yourself into those positions for too long, it starts to become almost like stuck, bound. It becomes habituated to who you think you are. And those have correlates of the way that we think and the way that we feel. And this is like, if you're familiar with neurolinguistic programming, there's a term called anchoring. And so you can anchor certain songs, for example, to certain feelings. So every time before you do a podcast interview or you go out on a date or whatever it is, you might play this one specific song, and it anchors you like, wow, like I feel that way. Well, we've been anchoring postural patterns for millennia, depending upon your belief systems. So when you hunch over into a position, you've anchored that position to like, oh, this is how I feel. This is how I respond when I'm in this position. When you win a race, you cross the finish line, when you're blind, deaf, whatever it may be, your shoulders come back, your arms go up overhead. You've anchored that position ancestrally to be like, I'm winning. So your postural patterns literally are a mental, emotional, physiological language. And you start to get into, there's no one postural pattern that's better or worse. They're just different words. To start to be able to speak that language, you start to have more, I think, autonomy in the way that you feel.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed too is just when I used to have a whole lot more stress, when I didn't look at life how I look at life now, I was doing stretching. I was doing a lot of flexibility-based work. I was doing PNF-based stretching, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. I was like, and now, especially over the last 5 years, 7 years, whatever it is, I still stretch, but I don't do nearly the amount of stretching, nor do I need to maintain flexibility because my nervous system isn't as bound up. So I can get into a full squat, no problem. My breathing, I don't have an issue actually allowing a full breath out anymore. So what I would say to people is like, if you're always tight, meaning like you need to foam roll all the time and stretch all the time, I don't have a problem with myofascial release and foam rolling, and I think it's fantastic. But when you're doing that all the time in order to maintain flexibility, what are we really doing? And I think part of it is tension, stress in the body, but another part of it is postural deviations and malalignment of the spine, because your body, as we talked about a little bit earlier, it's compensating, right? So like we always go back to kind of like that bucket with the hips. It's like, well, if you're let's just say you're in a anterior pelvic tilt. Well, what are we looking at? Well, if the hamstrings are tight, well, what else is going to happen? Well, most likely it's coming from lower. Is the ankle all locked up? So I think there's a way of working on this physiologically for more of a root cause based issue than always just stretching. And I would love to talk with you now about how you kind of rebuild the body. And I would say, again, I think for a lot of people, we always talk about how psychologically the mind, the nervous system, the peripheral nervous system affects the body, but the body also affects the mind. And in neurolinguistic programming, if you need to, you open up your chest, you put your arms overhead in a big V, and you kind of like roar or puff your chest out. Well, that tells you psychologically that, hey, you're ready, And so I think there's a lot we can do physiologically. And that's why if someone's dealing, and again, if we just go back to neurotransmitters and how the body feels, if you open it up, if you get it feeling less pain, you're going to produce more GABA, serotonin. You're going to feel better. So I'd love for you to kind of start talking about the Align method and how that's helped people as well.
Yeah. So the intention of creating the book, the Align method, and we also have online programs, and we teach, courses and such, is to start to integrate the concepts that you'd get from maybe weightlifting or yoga or a dance class or things of the sort. The truths throughout the various different movement dogmas are consistent. Like there's foundational laws in moving the body, whether you're a man, a woman, a child, elderly person, whatever you're doing. There's certain foundations that every person, it would be a shame for them to not understand. There's baseline fundamental mechanics of operating the human body. And the main intention was to make it so that fitness isn't a thing that you like drive in your car to do for 45 minutes and then you come back to your normal life. We can start to integrate some of those principles into our daily lives so that it becomes who we are as opposed to a thing that we do. Like if there's anything, it's like fitness is who you are. It's not a thing that you do. So when you're at your home, it's an opportunity to start to work on your connective tissue, to start to work on the function of your nervous system. If your visual muscles are chronically stuck staring into a screen or staring just anything up close, like myopically focused, your visual muscles are a continuation of your central nervous system. When they are honed in on a specific point, it's sending a signal into your autonomic nervous system, say, okay, we got to, get into that sympathetic focus, executive function, like get stuff done. We're out, we're hunting, we're pulling the bow back, I'm honed in, or maybe there's a predator attacking me and I'm focused in. When we go into that peripheral vision, that panoramic vision, you're taking the whole panoramic image in, that's sending the signal into the rest of your nervous system. It's like, man, I'm just kind of taking it in. I'm gathering information. Like, it's okay. I'm resting. I'm restoring. So in your home, something that you could do to incorporate fitness into your daily life would be maybe put your workstation, if you do, work on a computer or something of the sort, at a desk, put it near a window, and to give yourself eye breaks with regularity. It doesn't need to be, some every 20 minutes or 40 minutes, like any moment, just look up, out, like take a moment. You could, for a moment, just even if you don't have a window, allow your eyes to relax for a second and take the whole room in, kind of like spacing out for a second. As you're spacing out for a second. So that's cool. We're learning how to use our visual muscles as toggles to augment the function of our nervous system, change our state. So now it's like, okay, what other kind of toggles do we have? Well, breathing's a major one. So says everybody forever. Go to any martial arts place or yoga place or talk to anybody that's doing anything meaningful with their body. They've like discovered anything that seems impressive with their body. It's like, oh yeah, breath, for sure, breath. And so with that, as you're spacing out, if you are stressed and you want to calm down, you could emphasize a long exhalation. So you'll naturally do that if you look out over a panorama. You go, wow. That, wow. That's like, you think it's just words. You think it's just like, oh yeah, of course, I'll have long exhalation. No, that's your physiology communicating. It's healing itself. These are all onboard healing mechanisms that you, with your human brain, you just think it's like, oh yeah, whatever, but it's like, no, your body's literally going through these processes to downregulate and heal itself at a deep cellular level. So you can start to almost mimic those patterns through learning the tools and the principles, which is why I, made the Align method, and tap in to say, cool, I'm going to breathe in this way to start to calm the nervous system. Or maybe I want to upregulate myself. I want to get stimulated and kind of get more into that like ready to go place. Okay, cool. Maybe we're going to start to replicate more of like a that kind of huffing and puffing, like Wim Hof type stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason that if you do that huffing and puffing breathing pattern before you get into cold water, you'll have a stress-induced analgesic effect. You're juicing yourself up with the chemicals that say, I'm about to go into war. I need to be really smart, really alert, and probably downregulate my sensation for pain because I might get my arm chopped off. You know, and it's like when you fall off your bike or something, you're like, it's like it doesn't always hurt right away. It sometimes hurts the next day once you kind of catch up. And so when you get juiced up with that various neurochemistry to kind of keep yourself from feeling the pain of the present, you can tap into that stuff just with your breath. You know, so those are kind of interesting examples of like how my senses are a part of my fitness. Then it's like, well, what about postural patterns? As I'm speaking and communicating, I'm doing fitness. As I'm gesticulating with my hands, I'm moving my hips. Maybe let's do a walk and talk meeting. And let's do it outside. We're going to do Shinrin Yoku. You know, we're going to breathe in the phytoncides and the various different chemicals from the plants, boosting our immune system. And, you know, we isolate specific variables. You know, we hang our hats on that, but there's so much more going on than the few specific things that we point out. You know, so understanding those basic mechanics of, you know, when I am sitting down, am I sitting down effectively? Because sitting is incredibly important. It's, you know, it's a healing opportunity for the body. There's nothing wrong with sitting. Sitting is not the new smoking. It's how you sit. You know, it's the same thing with eating. It's how you eat. What's the origin of the food? You know, so all of these conversations are much broader and more nuanced than most headlines that we end up reading. Actually, you know, they don't provide us that much information. You know, so I intentionally created the baseline foundations that every human being must have, you know, from my perspective and a lot of other really smart people's perspectives. Like, it's like the fundamentals that every human body needs to have. And the reason I created that was just because I felt like there was a void, you know, and we're very fitness forward, but not enough like lifestyle focused, you know, like truly holistic living from a movement perspective. And that was the intention of the Align method.
I mean, I think that it's a great thing too, because it's beyond fitness. So it's like, well, you know, are you able to sit in a full squat? If not, why? Are you able to sit, you know, cross-legged? You know, if not, like, why? And so you start to look at that, and I don't know anybody where it's really just happened overnight. It's just like, oh, all of a sudden you turn 35, you turn 40, you turn 45, and you're supposed to get less flexible. Well, not really, you know, because I can show you many people that I've seen in many different countries who are able to maintain that level of flexibility. And yet they weren't stretching all day long or for 2 10-minute sessions. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Again, I do believe in that because we humans do sit in chairs, and chairs aren't necessarily the most natural thing. And so we do have this spinal compression. We do have tight hip flexors. We do have tight hamstrings. I like that you talk about hip hinges and why that's so important. Actually start to activate your glute muscles and your hamstrings. And so start to look at these things that you don't have to just do in a half-hour workout, a 45-minute workout. There are things that you can incorporate. Now that I'm in nicer weather, I'm able to go out and take my dog for a walk at sunrise. And it's one of the things that it's like my favorite part of the day is I get to watch the sunrise. Now that does a lot for me through, you know, my eyes to actually look at the different types of blue light, to see that, to be able to change my own neurochemistry from that. I'm breathing, I'm walking, I don't take my phone with me. I'm out with my dog, which, you know, that has its own thing to be said for it. And so, you know, I think these are, we have to look at more of an integration rather than just like, okay, I got my 30 minutes in a day, I got my 150 minutes for the week, I'm good. Well, you know, are you creating even more compensatory patterns with your workouts? And so that is one question that I had for you, is because, you know, I'm someone that however people want to work out, I'm for the most part good with that in the beginning, but then we need to transition to more of a holistic based program. So like, I'm not radically against machines in a gym if it's going to eventually get you to doing more functional based movement patterns and then, you know, other things. But I know as part of what you recommend, you do a lot of bands in your workouts, and you obviously know what you're doing. I want to hear more around that philosophy of using resistance bands rather than maybe barbells and heavier weight.
Yeah. I mean, I like both. I like whatever you're into, but I like resistance band because they're the ease of being able to travel with them. You know, so I do a lot of traveling. And so it's just so great to be able to throw, I have the Align band set, not that I'm like pitching the bands, but I put together various different sizes of bands and a door anchor and a hip band and all that stuff. It's like a full workout system, and it weighs like 2 pounds and it's flexible and all that. Like, you're never going to bring a kettlebell. If you bring a kettlebell, you're sorry. You're like, you fly with a kettlebell, like, come on. And so for me, it's important.
A problem. Yeah.
It's a problem. Yeah. And so, which I've been that guy doing road trips and bringing kettlebells and getting out, like swinging kettlebells. I'm an first of all, it takes one to know it.
It's just unnecessary. You don't need the kettlebell. You can leave that at home.
It's just unnecessary. Yeah. But what I like about the bands, like most things, like simple tools oftentimes provide the most value. You can use bands, and the reason I included a door anchor with the set is to use it for not just exercise, but also mobility. So a band, before getting into using bands really as like a focus with like fitness, it was more using it for clients to decompress joints. So resistance bands are excellent for creating decompression around literally all of the joints. And you can think of it as almost like, called banded distraction, or like flossing would be a more obvious term for it. And so you can put a band up in the door and have it hanging around, say hip level. And then you can wrap the bands around your hips, and then you can walk yourself out from the door. If you've been compressing yourself hunched over in a chair for the last 6 hours, one of the most medicinal things you could do would be to decompress the hips. Mm-hmm. You probably don't know anybody that's going to like do acro yoga with you and like pick you up and twist you around, but you can get that subtle pull from a resistance band just by, hooking it up around hip level, walking yourself out, doing like a little down dog, walking the dog out side to side, starting to reset that central nervous system. Like we were talking about before, if your spine is out of whack, if there's compression and, twists and turns and torque and impingement throughout that channel, you're shutting down your access to strength. And so bands, I think, beyond the fitness part, they're the best tool for any type of, if you're working with any type of like calisthenic movements, there's nothing better for progressions, so be able to actually take weight away from your body in order to lighten up a movement, even if it's like, say, a push-up or a pull-up or something of the sort. There's a lot of reasons to get into using resistance bands, but the main thing that I appreciate about them is the versatility and the adaptability of it. I wanted to mention something though, in relation to integrating fitness into our daily life, because there's a lot of scientific research backing that as well. Like I don't know if you're familiar with Joan Vernico. She worked with NASA for like 40 years working with the health of astronauts. And she found was when astronauts would go to space, when they would do like a front loaded or back loaded workout routine in zero gravity, they would end up having this rapid aging type process, and they would lose muscle and they'd increase fat and their bone density would decrease, and their body, they'd come back and they'd just be wrecked. Mm-hmm. But the astronauts that would implement regular bouts of like micro fitness, or neat non-exercise activity thermogenesis, more just dorky, unnecessary words for like moving your throughout the day with regularity, just get up every now and again. Or hang off of a pull-up bar every now and again, or maybe, do some band work, or just, go squat down and pet a puppy. Like, you just need regular bouts of circulation. You are a river. So you need to circulate those various different channels throughout your body. If you are sitting in stagnation for a long time, especially in a compromised position that wouldn't load or bear weight well, i.e. like hunching over in a chair, nothing wrong with chairs either. If you're in a chair, just figure out how to effectively sit in a chair, and that's what we break down in the Align method, and we can talk about that as well. But it's integrating those small micro bouts of movement throughout the day that circulate the various different fluids throughout your body, so you don't become a toxic septic tank of lymph and all the various different metabolites and juices that you produce throughout the day. You need to circulate yourself,
yes.
And so that's really this a primary solution to feeling better in your body is you just need to circulate yourself, and then within that, there's a lot of different ways to circulate yourself outside of just movement itself or like overt movement. There's, cold thermogenesis, by you going into a scenario where it's like, wow, I'm it's a little chilly outside, but I'm going to intentionally go out without like a big down jacket. I'm going to actually experience that like my ancestors have forever. When you do that, it's like, oh, wow, all of a sudden I'm producing more brown adipose tissue and I'm becoming more metabolically efficient. And, I've got cold shock proteins. It's like, wow, my body, because of that gradual exposure therapy, it's stepping up to the plate. And it's becoming, like we were talking previously on my podcast before this, you're callousing yourself, and callus isn't a bad thing. Callus is a place of greater circulation, so that connective tissue in your hands, like we were talking about on the Align podcast before, that's a place of greater circulation and tissue complexity. Your hands are more intelligent when they are well calloused. And so it's that slow, gradual exposure that really leads to, not just a well-circulated body, but also I think like a fulfilled life. Like your physical body is an expression of what's happening at all the levels. It's a symptom. Health is a symptom. Disease is a symptom.
Well, and it's funny too, because for me, all of this is hitting home because for the very first time, I didn't live in the city during the winter-based months in about, we'll say like 20 years. And so I actually lived in Maine because my girls were doing online school. And so we could live there. And we are right near the water. And on a good night, it's around 12 degrees, Fahrenheit. It's cold. And the stars are out, the air is fresh. I would go out every single night when I would take out the trash or whatever I need to do or take my dog out. And I would go out in just a t-shirt, usually shorts or pants. And it was brisk, but also my body, it didn't light me up in the terms of like energy where I was like, oh, I'm producing too much norepinephrine, because I wasn't fighting against it. I was just breathing it in, like working with it. And it was unbelievable to get that fresh air in and also just actually feeling like you're a part of nature. So that was a big thing for me. And then also, because I never had that in the city. The wind's whipping. It's just a totally different feel in Boston. But at the same time, I would always go to the gym. I would do my structured gym workouts. But in Maine, I have more access to being outside. I have more access to walking around. I can walk around barefoot. You're not walking around the streets of Boston barefoot. And I would also say this is that I only use bands. Yes, I had a kettlebell, but bands, a pull-up bar and a dip bar and dip bars. And I could do inverted rows. I could do all I wanted. But it was just a different type of working out that allowed me to not just go through the workout as what I wrote for myself, but feel the movements. And if you haven't done that, like there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, for the next 6 weeks, I'm just going to try it. Like I'm going to try something different. And that's what I did. And I actually really enjoyed it. I didn't lose muscle mass like I thought I was going to. If anything, I was having to retrain my nervous system in different ways from the neurological aspects of when I push out with this band, there's actually more tension. And okay, what do I need to do? Well, I need to start to stabilize at a much greater degree. And I realized that my left side, my left shoulder, the rotator, all the muscles around the rotator cuff, they're just not as stable as when I'm holding something out there. And I learned that actually because I took up archery during the pandemic. And I was like, oh, this is interesting because I don't have any issue doing a bench press. Not that I'm doing a lot of bench pressing or push-ups or anything, because I'm using both sides. When I start to go unilateral, things change dramatically. And so it was great for me to get back to that. And that's why, again, I want the same for other people, is I want them to start to integrate as much as they can. I know a lot of people are in, now maybe not as much, but going back to work, returning to work, they're in dress clothes. They can't just be sitting in a split on the floor, whatever it is, but they can start to, again, like you said, sit in their seat differently, stand, do some meetings, maybe get outside and take a call. A lot of my calls, if I can, I try to get outside, walk around, take that call. So I think these are all things, again, that we can start to bring to people. What else did you want to add to that?
I just, be the change you want to see in the world, man. Like don't be afraid to be the guy that says, hey, we all have this board meeting that probably half of you are just looking at Instagram notifications and you're not really even involved. Mm-hmm. Like, why don't we take a walk? Steve Jobs was somewhat successful. And that was a big part of his mentality. So when the creation of his facility, he really made a point to have a lot of nature and walking paths. And, it was rewarded to be outside, because he's thinking big picture. He's not thinking, how do I grind? Well, he's probably thinking this with a lot of people as well, but how do I just grind what I can out of this person? It's like, what if we start to put this person in a more creative, health promoting environment and incorporate some longevity into not just their health, but also their ideas. So that's what makes humans so incredible, is our capacity for adaptation. We become our environment. And we become, Jim Rohn, you become the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If you're in the jungle, you'll talk a little bit different and feel a little bit different. And, compared to if you're in like Milan, and so it's acknowledging, saying, okay, my environment informs the way that I feel, the way that I walk, the way that I breathe, the way that I think. Maybe it would be wise for me to step aside, kind of like we were examining our thoughts, examining our inner self-talk. Cool. Let's now go outside and examine our home. Let's examine my car, or my travel situation, examine my office. Is this an environment? Looking at it objectively, what would the shape of the human organism be that existed in this space? Mm-hmm. If you come to your house and all you have is, a couch and a TV, and there's no space to like ever lay down on the ground, like you just not even possible. There's no space. It's like, well, okay, you're probably going to turn into the shape of the couch, and your eyes are probably going to turn into the shape of staring into a box in front of you. And it's like, nothing wrong with that. It's not a moralistic thing. It's just understanding what it is that I'm doing to myself. So first it's having the sovereignty to say, okay, what do I want? First defining like, what's the vision of what I'd like to create? And then from there, you can reverse engineer your reality to start to match that vision. And a way to do that is to examine the environment that you are habitating yourself in. And if it's an environment that would lead to that vision, then great, you're winning. But very likely there's very simple, easy, affordable, low-hanging fruit things that you can do in your house to increase your longevity dramatically, and increase your vitality dramatically, and improve your sleep dramatically, and your wakefulness in the morning. Like, there's so much low-hanging fruit in Western culture. It's ridiculous. It's just a matter of getting the resources, which, if you're listening to you obviously have been on that. And then, taking action, and not being in a place of over complicating things. I think we're waiting for this huge panacea, $15,000 solution. If it's not 15 grand, it probably doesn't work. It's like, dude, fresh air and reasonably decent drinking water with maybe a little minerals in it, or just spring water will naturally have it. Relationships, being on purpose with your career, being around trees and nature every now and again, exposing yourself to all the various different realms of bacteria in the world. It's having like a dog in your life that they're actively bringing all that stuff in to start to improve your immune system. Travel is a good thing, just getting yourself outside of your bubble. Like, that's all health. And we think of health as being like, it's just Gatorade and Tybo, but I think it's so much more than Gatorade and Tybo.
Maybe just a little bit, but that's one place to start, I guess. I do really like the quote though. It's just like, is how you're living right now, if you were to look at it as an outsider for someone else's life, is it conducive to what your goals are? And if it is, like you said, well, then you're winning. Like, everything is good. Keep doing more of that. But, if you're in pain or you're not sleeping well, sleeping's an easy one, right? Like, if you're not sleeping well, are you going to bed too late? Are you staring at screens after 8 p.m.? Do you have blackout curtains in your room? How are you waking up? Are you eating too close to bed? It's like, because if you're doing the wrong things, well, then it's not conducive to a good night's sleep. And you can say the same thing with people with poor posture. Well, if you are seated, hunched forward over a desk for 8 hours a day, you have to expect to have poor posture, and you have to expect to be tight, and you have to expect to have that cervical flexion, which might lead to headaches or neck tension or whatever it might be. And so, I mean, I think that that's a great, takeaway right there is like, do a self-assessment of your life where you're at. Just choose one goal, and don't choose all of them at once, but it's like, hey, this is my goal. Am I leading the life of a person that is able to achieve this goal? Because if not, well, then we need to start with some changes. And like you said, low hanging fruit first, like no $15,000 piece of exercise equipment. Like maybe one day you'll get there, but there's really no need because the exercise equipment still needs to be used. It's you that actually needs to use the equipment.
Unless the 15,000, the more you pay, the more you pay attention. So if you need to spend a bunch of money on your health to become engaged, do that. There's no judgment, bad, good. It's just like define what you want, reverse engineer the path to get there. And now if something gets you closer to that path, then it's, more right in quotations. If someone veers you away from that, then, it's maybe a little bit less right. But if what you need is to spend a bunch of money on health and that truly fulfills you, that's great. Like most of the things that really matter in life are pretty darn close to free or quite cost efficient. But ultimately, whatever gets you to feel like it's working, go for it. It's just know that if you don't have 15 grand to spend on the machine or the biohacking gizmo or whatever, you're fine. Like the healthiest people that I have ever come across, and I've come across like a reasonable number of people, I'm like, whoa, like you're the best at the world at being awesome at your sport or whatever it may be. A lot of them don't speak any of this language and they don't have any biohacking at their house. They might have like a Theragun or something, and it's like, what is the recipe of what you're doing? And I think it's, it's some of the less tangible parts that are really governing them to kind of get them to that point. But the health stuff, it's like good air, good water, good food. Look at the origin and the sourcing of the food, regularity of movement. It's not just the movement, it's also how you move, understanding baseline mechanics of what is effective movement, realizing that you're always training. Just that idea of like, okay, right now I'm sitting here, I'm in my car, I'm training this position. Is it a position that I want to train? And you're like, okay, well, let's see. And a way you can check, you're sitting in your chair at your office, whatever it is. A way you can check in is say, have somebody push weight down on your shoulders, or maybe you can get like a little dumbbell or something like that, or you just feel it. Could I support weight through my shoulders while I'm sitting in this position? If you can, then you're practicing a great position. Mm-hmm. So when the time comes that you do need to show up in some type of fit fashion, and you need to run for some reason, or maybe you slip and you fall, you need to pick something up. You've been warming up for the last like week or month or decade because you ingrained this operating system of moving more effectively in your life. That operating system would be the only way that you survive if you lived in a more natural environment. And
I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you shouldn't have to warm up. Like that's a big part of it.
A warm up. Your whole day is a warm up. Yeah. You wake up, you're like, cool, we're warming up. Great.
Right. Yeah. If you need 20 minutes, I mean, I believe that for a long time. And as a certified strength and conditioning coach back in the day and all these different things, we would go through all these warm-ups, and I don't think there's anything wrong with them either. Cause you're actually training neurological patterns more than you're kind of warming up the body to get it ready for harder work. And that's, mainly I would say for explosive movements. But if you need 20 minutes to warm up your body, that kind of says something. I think that's a really good point that I don't think thought about in that way, is like the longer you need to warm up, the more you should be concerned, at least in my opinion. Would you feel the same way?
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't be concerned. I just say you're missing a lot of opportunities.
Like, let's say you can't do Romanian deadlifts, any type of, pattern where there's a hip hinge, like a lunge, without doing, downward facing dog and some Hindu push-ups and some leg swings. And I mean, in my opinion, it just seems like those are good things to do. There's nothing wrong. It's kind of like hedging your bet. That's safe to do. But if it takes you 15, 20 minutes to kind of loosen up your body, it might be a sign that the movement patterns before that in your day are stiffening you up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would just see it. I try to be like glass half full guy. So I would just see it as like, one, kudos that you can even warm up for 20 minutes and get into that position, because that's better than most of Western culture. Mm-hmm. And then two, it'd be like, this is great. Like, you have so much room for improvement. So I'm so happy for you that we're discovering this together. Like, this is just fantastic. Yes. So something as simple as throughout the day, in one of the chapters in the Align Method book is about the value of spending time on the ground. Mind blowing, spending time on the ground. Like, you do any yoga class, or maybe, Pilates, or maybe in various different classes, you'll just inevitably be on the ground a lot throughout that time frame. So I recommend spending, at least 30 minutes a day. Please God, spend at least 30 minutes a day on the ground. And that could be, you sit, maybe you have breakfast and you have some, a comfy rug, and you have some floor cushions, and you got like a coffee table, and you sit on the ground like your ancestors have forever. And most of the world still does. Most of the world that's not experiencing osteoarthritis of the hips and the knees and, pelvic floor dysfunctions and things of the sort. The body is not built to just collapse with time. The idea that you're 35 or 45 or 55 and things just start falling apart, that's based off of a broken model. And you're comparing yourself to people that I would never want to compare myself to. Nothing against them. Again, not moralistically bad or good. I just think they're misdirected. And so if you can start to just reinstill some of these really simple baseline fundamentals of movement, it's not extra work. It's not extra energy. It creates energy. It provides you more energy. It makes you feel better, more confident, more limber, flexible, strong. Like, it gives you. It's not, oh God, I got to buy a thing or add this. It's like, I don't have time. It's like, no, it gives you time. It gives you freedom. It gives you longevity. And it's darn close to free. So something as simple as just spending more time on the ground each day, by doing that, every time you need to get up to take a pee or make some tea or, whatever, you go through essentially a Turkish getup. Mm-hmm. That's working out. So now you're doing that Joan Vernikos NASA workout stuff where you're implementing small bouts of movement throughout your day. You're repeatedly recirculating, replenishing your cells. That's a healthy organism. That's how you are structured. That's how you're designed to live and thrive. You are not structured and designed to live and thrive by sitting in a compressed, hunched over, compromised position for 8 hours and then doing a blowout workout. It's just not the way you function. But it's so simple. Like, that's what's so exciting about all this.
Simple, effective, but yet you still have to do it. Like, that's the thing, is like, you just have to start to even implement 5 minutes. And one thing that I do is I just find that it's easy. Like, if you're just relaxing for the last hour of your night, your last day before bed, nothing wrong with getting down there. Even if you're watching some TV, you can get down on a yoga mat or on the floor on a rug, just like you said, and you can sit in position there, and you can do a couple stretches there, some mobility there. So I think these have been really helpful tips. I definitely want people to check out your book, which we will link up in the show notes, the Align Method. Where else can people find you online and connect?
I think typically people just go to Instagram, because we're all visual creatures. So Align Podcast is Instagram. If people are interested in having more video instructional, we have the Align Method online program. It's a 6-week program that we break down like nuts to bolts, all the fundamentals that we're talking about throughout this in a much more tangible way. In podcast conversations, my tendency is to veer out into the unknown. And sometimes I'm like, hold on, where are we exactly? We got to come back. So the 6-week program is much more on the ground. Here's how you do it. But yeah, Align Podcast on Instagram be a likely place. And then from there, there's the links to the resistance band sets and all that stuff if people were interested in getting started with that.
Yeah, I'm going to link all that up, the resistance bands, the book, your podcast, your Instagram, over at the show notes here today. Really fun conversation. Loved having you on. So I appreciate your time.
Thanks, man. Yeah, this is great. Thanks for creating the container for the conversation. That was great. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.